lights off for this presentation, probably because the details that you want to show are going to show up better, right?
Dark is good.
Dark is good.
How's that?
I like that curve cut.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Lucido, and as Dessa mentioned, I'm the defensible space, wildfire defensible space person for Yavapai County Cooperative Extension. You're probably thinking, what's the fire guy doing up here talking about water? Well, here's why I'm up here. A couple things happen when we talk about wildfire defensible space, and that is around this time of year when fire season hits, we tell people that judicious use of rainwater is a good way to keep your plants hydrated during fire season. And a good way to do that is with rainwater harvesting. So that's another reason. Well, that's one reason. Another reason is my background is landscape architecture, and so I've been involved to some extent with rainwater harvesting for a few years. So today I'm going to talk about some of the design aspects of rainwater harvesting, and some of them are commercial applications, most of them are residential. Hopefully you'll be able to take something away in that regard from what I have to say. I'm going to start with this slide, and here it comes, raining down. How about that? But anyway, this slide tells a lot of the story, and so what we have here, it's actually raining. You can kind of see all the puddling right here. This is a residence in Prescott, and what's going on here is the rain is actually falling on these pavers, and that's the first step, aside from the gutters, where the rain is being harvested. And I'll talk more about that later. Then it slopes down, and it hits this curve. Then there's a spillover here where the curve is cut, and then it goes into the yard. And the yard is armored with some crushed rock that starts to prevent erosion to some extent. But it also is a place where water stays in the ground. So you don't have, say, a specific vegetable garden, but you may have some ornamentals or trees that you want to harvest. This is kind of one of the strategies to do that. Now, continuing on, you can see that the water goes into this channel. There's another one over here. These are little infiltration channels that you'll notice are perpendicular to the slope of the house. So what that does is it actually keeps this guy's water on his lot, gives it a chance to infiltrate on his lot, and prevents problems to his downstream neighbor. That's one of the issues with rainwater harvesting that you want to keep in mind. So this is past the gutters and tanks, but this also illustrates one of the things that Dessa mentioned, and that is passive rainwater harvesting. You don't have to have tanks and pump systems, but those are also good depending on what your goal is. Okay, several things that are happening around our state and country. Close to home, this is actually a project I worked on in Prescott. This is Pioneer Park, and one of the county supervisors wanted to have a demonstration project that actually slowed sedimentation into one of the feeder washes of Granite Creek. And the reason that's important is sedimentation has hydrocarbons and pollutants and pesticides and things like that. Plus, it erodes and causes other problems. And so this was actually a special type of paving that would allow the rain to fall in, infiltrate below the paving, and then it can be stored in a medium below paving, and then there are pipes that are below the paving that kind of meter it out into these washes. And so on a larger scale, and that was one of the things that Dessa was talking about, this is one of those types of demonstration projects. And then right next to it we have waiver paving. And then over on the right, this is I believe this is a hospital in the Phoenix area. And the point of some of these things I'm going to show you is you're only limited by your imagination as far as how you want your harvesting system to look and how you want it to function. And here they're using these decorative sculptural, I don't know what you call them, and they catch water, and then they dump them in this plaza, and this might be an outdoor garden here. And so it's it's a visual element, but it's also serving a purpose. And just to give you some idea of scale, that's an 800-gallon tank, and I know one of the vendors in the back has got a small example of this, and I think Chris will probably also see some of these later on, maybe.
Yes.
But anyway, that's what 800 gallons looks like, and that's actually a steel culvert, and there's some detail sheets on the back that show you how to install this, how you pour the slab, how you put the overflow in, et cetera, et cetera. This tank is at Manzanita Co-Housing in Prescott. And a couple more tank treatments. This one is actually at Lady Bird Johnson. I almost said this last time. I was going to say Wildfire Center, but it's Wildflowers in Texas. And then, whoops, let's go back one. Just another treatment. I'm not sure where that is. So we have a battery stretch. Are we going to make it?
Yes. Keep going.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So it's not just at private residences where rainwater harvesting is taking place. This is up at Grand Canyon National Park. If you haven't been there, sorry,
I'm good.
this is,
I'm interrupting you for a second.
All right.
There you go.
thank you. This is part of their new visitor center, and it's worth seeing, not just the center, but all the improvements, the interpretive exhibits they've installed there. But this tank is at the end of actually the visitor center, and you can see they've treated it architecturally. By that I mean they've used a corrugated iron, they've wrapped it in this stone that's indigenous to the canyon, and then they've got a little area here that they're going to landscape and apparently feed with some of the rainwater, but they haven't done that yet. Another thing you may notice is there's a downspout here coming down, and it's going into this drain and going somewhere else, and I'm not sure what the story with that is. It could be that this tank is at its capacity, and so they just needed to dump the rest of the roof water somewhere else. And if it had been a perfect world, they probably would have had a bigger tank or another tank, but I can't second guess why they did that. This is another tank. This is up in Vancouver, Washington, and this is actually at a credit union. And this tank is not around the side of the credit union. It's not in the back. It's front and center where you walk in, and you can see they're really celebrating this thing. They're saying, yeah, we want our sign on this tank, and then we're going to actually tell you what the tank is doing. So they're not ashamed to say we're harvesting water, and they're actually advertising it. The other thing they do here is, again, they have materials on the tanks that complement the building. So you've got this vertical siding here, and then some siding there, and the colors are complementary. So again, they're integrating their tank and their system design visually into their building. So you can do that in your house or not do it, as we'll see when we see some slides in my house. Okay, this was on our last presentation in Prescott. We were fortunate enough to go to a permaculture businesses. This was the guy's house, and these are actually plastic tanks, but he didn't like the look of plastic tanks, so he stacked this rock around them. And then I don't know if you folks in the back can see it, but he then put some wire fabric around them to hold them in place. And then he actually custom made these sheet metal tops, so they kind of fit the context of the neighborhood and the house, and I think it's a nice look. But again, it's just an idea, and you don't have to go that way. There are other ways to treat aesthetics, certainly when it comes to tanks. And then on the commercial side, show you a little bit of some whimsical treatments. This is in Seattle, and that's actually a tank there, and it comes from way up here, goes down to the tank, and then the tank is offset from the building by the sidewalk. But again, be as creative and as whimsical as you want to be. Good question. I don't know. The question was, what are the extra green things coming out? And
Fingers.
fingers.
That's a pond.
Collect more water.
It's welcoming in.
Well, I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
In Seattle, it would.
Well, there you go, it's Seattle.
Flying here.
Okay, another one, this one's a little more self-explanatory. You've got the horizontal coming off the building and then vertical down into a big cup. And of course, what does the cup do when it gets water? It runneth over and goes somewhere else. So anyway, again, it's not just residential, it's commercial as well. And as far as the look or the way you want it to function, the sky is the limit. And then my favorite, and I must admit, I really don't know the story behind these, but a couple of these shots, by the way, we got from Brad Lancaster, and some of you may have heard that name. He's kind of the rainwater harvesting guru. He's been doing it for about 15 years. I noticed on some of the vendor tables in the back, some of his books are out there. But anyway, he had this photo on his website, and when I saw these, all I could think about were blue World War II hand grenades that were about to go in the ground. And anyway, I just thought it was kind of interesting. Okay, so I mentioned that I'm the wildfire defensible space person, and so that's the only other commercial you're going to get for that. But afterwards, you can ask me about that if you want. I'd be happy to talk about that too. But when I go out to talk to communities in Prescott and the rest of Yavapai County, I usually have a rainwater harvesting component in my talk. And one of the ways I grab people's attention is, for example, and this is at Hidden Valley in Prescott, I say, well, here's your community down here, and here's the size of Prescott, and here's your community enlarged. It's got maybe 700 lots on it, and this is kind of tying into what Odessa said earlier. So on those 700 roofs, if we made the assumption that each roof was 1,500 square feet, and I think that's kind of on the low side because these are by and large, fairly large houses. And that's from a 1-inch rain, that's 654,000 gallons or 2 acre-feet. And so I'm going to back the train up here just for a second. And so that's from this one little area in Prescott, and that's just from the roofs. So we're not talking about your yard or your pavement or your driveway, just the roofs or the common areas. Okay, and so we had some discussion earlier about rainwater harvesting law, and I moved down here from Colorado. And up in Colorado, it's legal only if you do not have a water supply to your house, and you can only harvest from your roofs, and you cannot harvest if you're a commercial business. And if you remember back to my first slide, I showed a house in Prescott that actually showed some pavers. And in Arizona, under Arizona law, you can harvest not just on your roof, but on your pavers, on your property. But again, Colorado has to be just on your roof. And then the slide to the, or the picture on the right, again, it's just showing that pervious pavement that I mentioned at Pioneer Park in action. And you can see on the left, it's regular paving, it's beating up. On the right, it's pervious, and it soaks into the ground and is stored there. And I'm not lobbying for pavement. It's probably not appropriate for most residences, but I just want to let you know that technology's out there, and you can go that way, and I think it does make sense for commercial applications. Then, let's see, in Tucson, I think back in 2010, put into effect one of the nation's first harvesting of rainwater for landscape irrigation laws. And so that's been on the books for a couple of years, and you're probably wondering, well, in Tucson it's hot and dry, and what if they put these plants in the ground in the summer and it doesn't rain for 3 months? What do they do? Well, they took that into consideration, and so they actually say they might suspend the requirements of the ordinance temporarily during drought, but then they also give you a grace period of, I think it's 3 years to establish the plants. So you've got a little bit of flexibility in that. But it's a good first step because it's getting, if the city's doing it, then it can't be far behind that they're, if not asking residents to do it, then maybe they're providing financial incentives, and a little bit more on that later to kind of tie into what
We didn't
a chance to read this while you were talking, and
Oh.
I didn't get either one. What in effect does this ordinance say?
The source ordinance says that in Tucson, in the city limits of Tucson, commercial projects are required to harvest rainwater for their landscaping,
Required to.
require.
Oh, okay.
But they realize there are some extenuating circumstances like drought, like giving the plants a little time to acclimate. So they'll probably have, on some of these projects, temporary irrigation systems. And then after 2 or 3 years, then the plants are on their own and they're being watered as per the ordinance. Chris?
And I believe the requirement on that is that they meet 50% of the water needs for their landscaping from
Okay.
the rainwater
Yeah,
harvest.
thank you. And
So that can be in passive or active format.
thank you. And I was kind of looking, I knew I'd heard something about there, it is attack right there, yeah. 50% of the landscape water demand using passive water harvesting to meet. So it is happening, and I'll touch again upon Prescott and some other places. But first, some benefits of rainwater harvesting. We've kind of been over some of these. Wow. It's lower in salts, and sometimes there are small amounts of nitrogen, so you get some foliar feeding on your plants, more than processed capital. It obviously conserves water, and it reduces sedimentation and pollution of natural drainages, and I'll talk more about that later too. But that project I showed you earlier at Pioneer Park, where we were using impervious pavement to slow down runoff and actually hold it in the ground. That's one of the big issues in cities, and in a lot of the larger cities, Phoenix and most of the cities in the valley, they have requirements for rainwater. So, and the reason they have detention requirements, and by that I mean you have to keep it on your site, is because they were finding that the infrastructure that they would have to build, the catch basins, the sewer mains, et cetera, were so costly and causing problems because they were beyond capacity that it made sense to, hey, what a novel idea, keep it on your site. Okay, it reduces erosion and obviously lowers monthly water bills. And again, Odessa already talked about this. There used to be a one-time state tax credit of 25% of the cost up to $1,000, but that's no more. But I do want to mention, I talked to the woman at the state who administered that, and she told me that every year they, before when it was in place, they earmarked $500,000 for it. So that you as homeowners could take advantage of that on your tax. And she said it was never exhausted in any one fiscal year. The other thing I might suggest is when and if the economy comes back and you want to be able to get this tax credit, write your representative, and maybe they'll bring this thing back. And then again, in Prescott anyway, there's a one-time $100 maximum credit on the water bill for putting in rainwater harvesting things. And I actually got online and I was looking for similar programs for Clarkdale and Camp Verde and Cottonwood, credits for your water bill, and I didn't see anything. Does anybody know if there is anything in place in those 3 cities? Yeah, or Sedona?
No, they're in the.
There isn't.
Okay.
I don't believe there is.
Well, it's actually, it works pretty well. I put one in at my house, but I didn't meet there was a minimum size, and I didn't use tanks, I just went passive. So I was not able to take advantage of that, but that's something worth having too. So, okay, 3 basic steps to harvest. So you want to collect it, we've talked about that, you want to store it, and that's optional. Remember, you don't have to have tanks, and the tanks can be good depending on what your ultimate goal is. You want to lessen the energy of flowing water when it comes out of your downspout. You don't want to create erosion, or if it's going somewhere else, you don't want to create problems for your downstream neighbor. So you want to disperse it, infiltrate it. These are, I think these are the 3 you want to keep in mind as you consider a rainwater harvesting system. You want to keep it on your property. You don't want to create problems for your downstream neighbor. if you're creating basins and drainages, not concrete drainages, but just natural looking swales and drainage corridors in the ground, you want to keep them generally 10 feet from buildings, and that's because a lot of soils are expansive. That means if the soils get wet, the soils expand, and then they dry out, they contract, and if that's near foundation, potentially you could get some foundation issues. And these are 3 harvesting strategies. Again, in passive harvesting designs, you can kind of repeat these 3 strategies across your landscape. The first one is just a berm. It's you don't do any digging. You may have some soil or fill from some other project in your yard, and so you would actually berm up and create a berm where the water would collect. And then you can excavate basins, and then these things are landscaped or planted. You might put decorative rocks and boulders in them, and then you can kind of stair step these, have multiple basins and spillways, and I'll have more examples of that. And again, okay, real quickly, how much water does a 1,000 square foot roof and a 1-inch ring give you? Okay, good, excellent. So that tank looks good, but won't be much good. Okay, some residential design examples, and I worked on parts of this, so you can blame me for certain parts of it, but not other parts. What I want to show you here is, and I see this all around Prescott, and you may see it here too, but here is the downspout, and here is where that water ends up. It goes underground here, and it dumps onto the road. And then similar situation here. You've got a little swale going from another part of the house. It's a big house, and dumps right onto the pavement, and in effect creates problems. Or maybe problems is too strong a word, but if you can imagine 10,000 homes doing this, all of a sudden there is a big problem. So that's one of the ways that harvesting it and keeping it on your property helps out you and helps out your neighbor. And so if you're downstream of something like this, you want your upstream neighbor to do something like this. Oh, and the other interesting thing about this property is they had me design this swale form, which is kind of over here in their yard, but I could not convince them to put this water into this thing. So the bottom line here is this is when rainwater is viewed as a nuisance, and that's kind of the old thinking. Dump it on the street and get rid of it. We want to view it as a resource. So in this yard, for example, they would have created a swale here and landscaped it and kept the water on site. Okay, this is 2 types of rainwater harvesting you've kind of already heard about, passive and active. This is at my house. And passive, it's getting into your landscape without using tanks or pumps. Simple definition. And active, you use tanks and pumps. And I threw this slide in because I thought this was a terrific example of integrating the tanks into the design of this yard. And so what you see here is you've got several tanks, small tanks, and they're just culverts with a sheet mill top. But they actually form piers in between this fence, and then the fence is landscaping. So when you think about rainwater harvesting, maybe think about visually integrating it into the look of your yard. That's certainly an option, and maybe you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Question?
Did you connect the tanks with pipes?
Yes.
Good.
Well, I didn't do this, but
Well,
I could.
yeah, somebody did, right?
I've noticed that all the examples I've seen so far are vertical in their shape. Do you have any examples of horizontal, like 800-gallon tank that has a less dominating effect on the appearance of the home?
No, and the question was, are there other forms of tanks other than vertical that have less of a visual impact on the house? The other thing you can do is, and depending on what your geology is, you can bury these. And I've seen them buried all the way, half buried, so that's another option. Question?
In Hawaii, they did a really interesting one for a house where they had, the tank was actually part of the core of the house. And with them, what they got was they got pure rainwater for domestic use, and because it was up at the top, they got water pressure.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, terrific idea,
And then you never even really saw the tank.
so that's a perfect example of doing double or triple duty. So you get your water pressure issue solved, you get fresh water, and it becomes a thematic element in your house or in your yard. Okay, so this is my backyard, and I threw this slide in to illustrate that when you harvest, it doesn't have to be pretty. This is my garage here, and there's my gutter. Here's my downspout, and this used to go down, and then it went back behind this fence out in the alley, where it fed into a French drain, which is just a horizontal pipe with holes cut in. But it was in the alley, so I lost all that water. So I just took a couple pieces of the downspout that I had laying around and reconfigured it, put some tar on the bottom so it didn't leak out, and you know, it's in the back of my yard, and it was quick and easy to do, and all of a sudden I'm getting all that extra water. And there's where it dumps into right there, and you could take this several steps further. You could put hoses on there to get it farther out. I haven't done that yet, but again, just wanted to show that it doesn't have to be technical and hard and or even pretty. And this is my front yard, and in this situation, the way this used to be is this came down and kind of kicked out here towards me, and then went down my driveway and went out the street, and I couldn't let that happen, so I rented a kind of a mini jackhammer at Home Depot and actually chipped out this section of my patio, and then put in a pipe that connected to the downspout, which is right there, and it flows into my planter. And again, nothing fancy, and this is all passive. I don't have tanks in my yard because I've got a very small lot. Two, I'm in a historic district, so I can't change the look of my house. It's viewed from the street, so I have certain other issues. So that's one of the reasons I did it this way. And then here's my neighbor's house, and again, I'm back to rainwater harvesting being viewed or on-site water being viewed as a nuisance instead of a resource. So here's his downspout, and here's where it ends up right here, and it kind of dribbles out into the street. And I've talked to him about this, and I don't know if he's going to do it, but it would be a very easy matter since he's already got a horizontal pipe from here out to here to put in a 45-degree elbow and have it bubble up here. And so he's keeping all that water on site and doing some good. Now, when you do that, you have to be careful because, ponderosa pines don't like their feet wet, and they can get too much water and they'll die. And I realize you don't have those over here, but that would also apply with most cacti. So you have to think about what you're watering and how much water it's going to get. But that is a strategy that could be put in place here. And there's just this wall is probably 100 years old, and whenever he would water in here with the hose, it would leak out, and so he got a bunch of Gorilla Glue and just and then Gorilla Glue is yellow when it cures, so he didn't like that, so then he came back and painted it blue. All right, another shot of my house, and I can't take credit for this, but what's going on here is somebody had the foresight to put in a French drain that connected to my downspout. So all this area in here is fed via a French drain underground. Somebody mentioned, or we mentioned mulch earlier, and this mulch here, I put on It's just turf that I'm in the process of getting rid of it. And I could go in and dig under the mulch as recently, before it really got hot and dry about 2 weeks ago, and it was still moist down to 6 inches. And on the turf side, it was as dry as a bone. So don't forget the mulch. And that's where it goes. Okay, another shot of a home in Prescott. And I do have some of your area, thanks to Chris, which I'll get to in a second. So I know you're all thinking, oh, we don't want to sell Prescott. Anyway, so this was a property I actually used in my fireworks presentation, but it's also an example of a property that kind of has a big picture. The big picture is it's fire-wise, it's aesthetically pleasing, and you can see this created swale here, lots of boulders, native grasses, et cetera, et cetera. And then another thing they did, which I like, is they actually put in pavers and crushed rock in the center of the driveway. This is what they used to do 80 years ago, believe it or not. They wouldn't pave the whole driveway because, well, what's the center of the driveway do besides collect oil? So in this one, they put in pavers and gravel, and that's another space where you can collect water and keep it on site. You can't really direct it there; it just falls there and stays there. But again, it's another opportunity to help some of the plants out. A swale that's just upstream of the neighbor's house, who's downstream here. And this property is also the same one that I showed you the first slide of that rainwater harvesting in action. So this is, whatever you want to call it. I call it informal natural look. You want to integrate your rainwater harvesting into your design. And then this is another one, another house in Prescott, a little more formal. And this house is pretty interesting on a number of levels. All the physical work here was done by a 55-year-old woman. And by all, I mean, she put in these retaining walls. This used to be, you can see the slope of what the hill used to do here. And the other thing she did, which pertains to rainwater harvesting, is she created these very not steep, meandering, rock-lined swales that just went back and forth across her property. And so she told me that when it rained, not to drop the rainwater left her property. She's on a hill. The other thing about her property is she's downstream of some other properties, and she's gladly accepting their rainwater. So yeah, she did a great job here. She's keeping it on her property, keeping others' water on her property, and she's preventing problems downstream. Okay, back to this thing. Talked about this earlier, so I'm not going to go over this again.
Could I ask you to elaborate on something?
Sure.
You sort of peripherally mentioned the pavers. Are the pavers, do they have like a sand base underneath and the water is percolating through the pavers? Or is it just acting as a surface?
Well, it's both, but if I can get you to hold that question, I'll show a little bit more on that in a minute.
Okay.
So this is a how much water can you save calculator, and this is the one that was put together by Texas A&M University. And even though it says Prescott, Arizona, they actually, if you go to their website, they have done it for several states, not just Texas, and then several towns within those states, and Prescott's one of them. Unfortunately, there's not one for Cottonwood or Canterbury or Clarkdale. But you can still go onto this website, and for example, Kingman's at the same elevation. I realize they have somewhat different rainfall patterns, but they have a lot of other great calculators, and that's the point I want to make here. Not necessarily this one, but since I'm on this one, the way this works is out up here, you would input your catchment area, for example, your roof, maybe that's 1,000 square feet. Then your catchment surface, if it's a roof, it's got a high coefficient of 0.9. Let's say your catchment surface on what you input here, it does all these calculations down here. And so it'll tell you how much you're storing, how much water you're gonna use based on evapotranspiration rates and your storage. And so you can put in all kinds of scenarios in these calculators, depending on what you wanna do. And it's set up, again, for, in this case, Prescott's evapotranspiration rates. As I said, there's not one for Cottonwood, but you could probably find one out there on the net. And these are just some examples. I'm not gonna go into these, but as I said, you can put in all kinds of numbers and you get the different scenarios. For example, here, I put in that I've got a very large roof, and all of a sudden I'm storing water. And then over here, it's a smaller roof, all of a sudden I'm not storing water. So that's kind of how it works. And this is the actual site. And again, I wish they had something for Cottonwood, but they don't. And then just a couple different swales. Again, I'm the defensible space guy, so I look at things that will burn. And so these are both, I think, functional and aesthetically pleasing. But this one will burn, and you'll have to put mulch on it periodically, top dress. This one, once you do it, it's good forever. And okay, thanks to Chris for these slides. Got a great before. Oops, what did I do there? There we go, before and after. And great slide, by the way. Where is this one?
That's in the village of Oak Creek.
Okay. And a couple things I like. Right here, it looks like there's a little planted area, and then it almost looks like it may connect over here, or maybe the water flows this way and goes underneath. Is that possible?
Well, the first base is actually on the right with the sunflower that comes off of a driveway.
Right here, okay.
And that's connected to two other basins that come off of a cul-de-sac road surface. And then those three are all combined and they go around the corner of the house.
Okay.
Question, is mulch a fire hazard?
Yes.
To what extent do we worry about that? I use leaves, deciduous leaves, for which I have a good source.
Well, that depends on a lot of things. It depends how thick it is, the mulch. It depends how close it is to other things that will burn. If it's right up against the house or a structure that would ignite, I would tend to not use it there. Also, it depends on how fire resistant your house is, the construction of your house. Because once something's on fire, and this can come from literally miles away, embers can actually come from miles away, hit that pile of mulch, and perhaps start your house on fire. But again, look at the big picture, and if maybe you're putting something on top of them to keep them a little bit moist, and they're breaking down fairly quickly, they're not close to the house, that's probably okay.
Thank you.
But you're welcome. Anybody that has any Firewatch questions, we can talk to me after. I'll be happy to help you out with those. And another great shot of some wildflowers and some ground treatments, rock in that little planet area. And some other local slides, shots of local properties. Another great before and after. And here, more so than I think in Prescott, it seems like the style of houses and the architecture has a lot of these spouts, like here and here. And those are kind of fun opportunities. There are some things you can buy to put on those and have it really spout out when it rains. Or maybe just have a planted basin beneath that takes advantage of that. You don't see the stucco hacienda look in Prescott as much. Okay, so gentleman was asking about pavers. On the left are traditional pavers, and they're about 2 3/4 inches thick by about 8 inches. And you do actually harvest a little bit of water through the cracks between the pavers. But if you've got a real gully washer, you're not going to capture a lot there. So a couple of manufacturers came up with these pavers, and you've got about a 1/4 inch space between them, so you get a lot more water infiltrating and percolating. And then notice the thickness, and the reason they're thicker is because the manufacturers realize that these harvesting pavers may be put on different types of substrate that are going to want to store some of that water, And so the substrate maybe not be as strong as concrete or what you might put these on. And so they made these thicker to be able to handle that. So you can actually, so you'll harvest more with these, and these also can go on basically an aggregate face course base, which is sand and gravel, and not move around, not migrate.
Are they more expensive, those bigger?
I think they are, I don't know the cost of them. Yeah, they would be on a per square foot basis too, because there's more material.
What do you think? Everybody has them.
I haven't seen them locally, but I was at a similar presentation like this a year ago, and one of the vendors from Phoenix brought them up. So if you want, you can leave me your contact info, and I can run that down for you. And then I know a couple of the vendors in the back have similar things. This is a first flush device. Again, the point of this slide is to tell you that there are a lot of good and new technologies out there. And I think you've got this resource. This is one of the good ones in your package. City of Tucson puts out a great one. And then, as I mentioned, Brad Lancaster, the Rainwater harvesting guru, he's got these two out, and I saw them on the back tables. And then he's got a third. Has anybody seen this one out yet?
No. It's not out yet.
Okay, all right. Sounds like you folks are dialed in.
We're waiting.
Okay. Can I answer any questions? All right. I guess we'll take another break.
Yeah, 25, yeah, we got two. But, what do you say, Jess, a 10-minute break?
Yeah, let's take a 10-minute break. 5 after, we'll come back. And then Jeff Shalal will do the third talk, and we'll hear from the vendors.